Guanggun is a psychopath or a violent maniac. There is a drama where the main character is a madman. The story was that the Alpha Guanggun was so fierce and obsessed with the Beta that it was very scary. The drama called Crazy, which only he watched, received a record low rating of 0%. And it's been 2 weeks since he plunged into this madness. So, he spent this morning next to the CEO. The secretary reminded him that at 4 o'clock there was a meeting at the headquarters on business strategy, and at noon there was a meeting with the board of directors. However, he asked him to reschedule everything. Paexion agreed. In fact, he had already had to postpone many times before, so it was no surprise that this time he was asked to do so again. The man looked at him sideways and ordered him to bring Taebyong to lunch, emphasizing that they would have lunch together. Paexion tried to correct him as he mispronounced the boy's name. However, he furrowed his brow and said it didn't matter. The secretary asked if he minded wearing a red tie. The man replied that he didn't care, so he tried to do it himself. However, the director was too tall, and it was difficult for him to do it. He was also annoyed that he didn't even want to bend down a little. As soon as he managed to do it, he breathed a sigh of relief and told Yoon Tai-oh that the car was waiting for him. Paexion asked CEO Kim Dae-yun to wait and informed him that the CEO was about to leave. However, there was silence in response, so he got a little nervous and tried to call him again and again. So, when the CEO said he was ready, the guy agreed, although he was confused about what was about to happen. They went downstairs and headed toward the company car. Paexion walked a little behind and was very worried. In the end, his assumptions came true. It turned out that the manager, Kim Dae-hyun, had fallen asleep and was not responding, so he had to apologize to the director for that. The man was very angry, which meant that his actions could lead to unexpected decisions. Therefore, considering Yoon Tai-oh's possible reaction, he asked him to wait and immediately ran to catch another car. However, it was too late. While the guy was opening the car door and inviting him to get in, he had already gotten even with his employee. The man did not understand the guy's surprise, as he thought he had done everything right. However, the secretary thought the opposite, suggesting that he shouldn't have done it. The man began to treat the CEO's wounded arm and noticed that he could have been badly injured. However, when he noticed the beaten driver, he almost threw up, but he explained it by saying that he just didn't feel well today. Since this was a common thing for the director, he calmly adjusted his tie and advised the guy to move faster. After that, he told him to deal with it later. Finally, the men arrived at the company's office. Standing by the elevator, Park Seon said that they would see each other in the evening. However, Yoon Tai-oh, without turning his head, reminded him of his boss, Kim Dae-hyun, and told him that he was not doing a very good job today. The secretary obediently bowed his head and apologized, realizing that this would not lead to anything good. Nevertheless, he turned around, tapped him on the shoulder, and silently put a bank card in his hand. The guy started asking what it was, so the man asked him to visit the hospital before going home. He recalled that he was feeling unwell and said that he would entrust his work to the secretary from the 3rd department. After that, looking him up and down, he expressed hope that this would not happen again tomorrow. As soon as the elevator doors closed, Park Seon realized that he had indeed made too many mistakes today. Nevertheless, he looked at the card and thought that maybe this money would be his rainy day fund. In fact, as soon as Yoon Tai-oh entered the office, his work began, which consisted of cleaning the house. This included doing laundry, putting the living room and bathroom in order. He also had to take care of the garden. All of this was the responsibility of the secretaries in the 1st department, where he had been working lately. However, since all the team members had been fired by Yoon Tai-o, all this work fell on him alone. At times, it was very difficult for him to deal with everything. He hated his boss for this and didn't understand what he would do if he got rid of all the employees. Suddenly, he was awakened by the sound of the door lock opening, so he ran out, swearing that he hadn't said anything. But when he got closer, he saw people from the special security team of the third department, which consisted entirely of alphas. The guy was quite confused, which is why he began to ask them how they got here, namely, how they entered. However, Kang Seok-ho reminded him that he had asked him to take care of the leader, Kim Da-hyun. The other interrupted him and emphasized that he had already taken care of it, although Pak Sion was still confused and did not understand why all this was happening. Eventually, he realized that Yoon Tai-o may have decided to get rid of him. Kang Seok-ho actually pointed a finger at him and said that he was the reason they were here. The only thing he did not understand was why the director gave him his card and ordered him to go to the hospital, although he assumed that it could be the last act of mercy. The guy was trembling from the unknown. Instead, the men around him asked their boss to be gentle with him so that he wouldn't have to take the secretary to the bathroom. However, Kang Seok-ho put his hand on his head and asked him why he had deceived the director by saying he was sick. After all, because of this, they would have to work in the first department. The guy started shouting and explaining that he really was sick and that the secretaries from the third department were supposed to come, not the guards, which only made them laugh even more. Eventually, Paek Sion calmed down, realizing why they had come here, and began to ask them what they could do around the house. Although looking at them, he realized that these men could not help him with anything serious. So he picked up the phone and started looking for the number of the CEO. The men started to stop him and promised that they would do whatever he told them to do. So, in a few minutes, they took the necessary tools and were ready for any instructions from the secretary. The guy noticed that the house had a cleaning system, but all the little things had to be done manually. Therefore, he advised them not to make any mistakes. Still smiling, he added that they should listen to him if they really wanted to live. Thus, the men began their work. Kang Seok-ho ordered them to move quickly and told them what to do and how to do it. Given that the threats had worked, Pak Sion breathed a sigh of relief, as he now had time to rest. So he sat down on a comfortable mattress and covered himself with a blanket. However, at this time he received a call from the head of the second secretarial department. The guy picked up the phone relaxed, and the man told him that they had a problem, because Kim Dae-hyun had escaped. When he heard that, the phone fell on his face. He was annoyed that he had done it again. So, a few minutes later, he was standing outside his apartment with bodyguards, trying to get in. The secretary could do this because it was his job to have a key that opened all the doors. Kang Seok-ho began to ask what he was holding, not understanding why he needed it. The boy replied that it was a lockpick. Paek Sion asked him how he thought he was supposed to get to the position of manager at that age, wondering why the bastard needed a fire extinguisher. Still, they managed to get inside, where they saw a complete mess around them and a pile of uncollected garbage. The secretary asked the security guard if Kim Dae-hyun was still studying at the university for beta. He confirmed it and added that he was still working part-time at a cafe to pay for his studies. However, when Pak Sion noticed the karaoke tickets, which were quite expensive, he asked Kang Seok-ho where the student had gotten so much money. Eventually, the secretary got suspicious and immediately called the bank, saying that he wanted to block all of Yoon Tai-o's cards. While he could not believe that this could happen, he asked why the boy had done it. Paek Sion turned around and replied that this time he wasn't sure Kim Dae-hyun could have just run away. Among the many betas that Yoon Tae-oh went through in the drama titled Crazy, there was one he hated the most. The one who uses emotions for his own benefit and then stabs him in the back. That was Kim Dae-hyun. Therefore, Park Si-on realized that he needed to stop Yoon Tae-oh before he killed another person. So he called the CEO, although the conversation started with questions about food and how he was resting, which irritated the guard. Finally, he apologized and asked the man to check his wallet just in case. However, a few seconds later, the man started screaming into the phone so loudly that they were all very frightened. The director ordered the man to find Kim Dae-hyun immediately and then ended the call. The only thing clear from this conversation was that it was going to be a difficult case. In the original movie, Kim Dae-hyun's role ended when he said he would take care of it. However, now, when the guard asked him what was going on, he had no idea what was going to happen next. The bank card statement indicated where he might be, so they decided to split up and start searching. However, they didn't see the man anywhere, examining every corner. In the end, they were left with only one place where he could be. A woman in a red dress met the secretary at the door. She was very friendly and smiling. Paik Si-on explained to her that he was looking for someone and showed her a photo of the leader, Kim Dae-hyun, on the screen of his phone. The woman said that they had to protect the privacy of their clients. However, the secretary took a delicate approach to her. As soon as he offered her a tidy sum of money, she immediately invited him inside and showed him where to go. The woman led him to the door of one of the rooms and emphasized that the person he was looking for was there. The secretary asked her to pretend that she hadn't heard anything, adding some more money. So she told him not to worry and to go about his business. So Park Si-on burst into the room and started shouting for Kim Dae-hyun, but he was in for a surprise. He was sitting in the company of girls and was very drunk. The only thing that upset the man was that he was found so quickly. The secretary tried to restrain himself a bit, so he closed his eyes and kindly asked the girls to leave the room. However, Kim Dae-hyun ordered them to stay and continue to be close to him. Instead, he advised the secretary to leave the room. Paik Si-on was outraged by this behavior, so he grabbed a bottle, smashed it on the floor, and started yelling, telling them to get out. The girls were very scared and immediately started running away. Kim Dae-hyun was unhappy and angry because they had just started. He also threatened them that he would not pay them. When Paik Si-on noticed the expensive alcohol on the table, he asked if he was crazy. However, the man did not understand how the guy knew his name and who he was. So the secretary asked if he remembered the company, Yoon Tae-oh, from whom he had stolen the card. Kim Dae-hyun didn't think it was a big deal. Instead, he offered to play with him, asking for an extra fee. The secretary stared at him, but didn't understand how he could think of betraying the CEO, no matter how fearless he was. Kim Dae-hyun said that it was not in his interest to obey the boys. However, Paik Si-on pointed out that he was not that useful. The man was very angry that he spoke to him in such a tone, so he clenched his hand into a fist and thought about something. Then he picked up a glass that was on the table next to him and threw it at the secretary. The glass shattered into small pieces against the wall, but fortunately it did not hit the man in the head. So the man grabbed the knife and started shouting that he was talking nonsense, emphasizing that he had lost all fear. While the secretary asked him to stop, as he did not have the strength to fight him, he did not think of doing so. Instead, he attacked him with anger. The latter managed to dodge, so his arm went above his head. Then he punched him in the stomach with all his might. Finally, he hit him with an ashtray so that he fell to the floor, losing consciousness. However, when the secretary noticed that Kim Dae-hyun was bleeding, he began to revive him. He realized that it was really crazy to try to quietly take the man to Yoon Tai-oh. However, it turned out that the man had deceived him and suddenly cut his neck, scolding him and saying goodbye. Paek Si-on was shocked that he was taken by surprise and lamented that he was going to die so senselessly. His only hope was that Yoon Tai-oh would at least pay for his funeral. However, to their surprise, the CEO appeared in the room and began to ask them what they were doing here. Having calmed down a bit, the men began to think about how to proceed, so the room was silent. Yoon Tae-oh lit a cigarette, threw an angry glance at Kim Dae-hyun, and ordered him to take off his clothes. Paek Si-on was confused because he thought that no matter how crazy the man was, it was too much to make him do it in the middle of all this. Kim Dae-hyun tried to beg him to stop. He explained that it would hurt him and that he could not do it here. However, since the man was unyielding, no amount of persuasion worked on him. Therefore, the perpetrator began to slowly unbutton his shirt. However, Yoon Tai-oh noticed that he was not talking to him but to the secretary. The guy was shocked and could not say a word. After calming down a bit, he explained that his name was Paek Si-on and that he was not the person who had stolen his money. He also added that this was not the problem now. Nevertheless, the man insisted. Despite the fact that the secretary was yelling, asking why he was the one, he replied that he was annoyed by the whole thing. The man said that he hated it when his things broke and asked the guy if he knew about it. Kim Dae-hyun confirmed this and started shouting that he had ashes in his hair because of the secretary. After that, he asked to punish him for it. Paek Si-on looked down and started apologizing, saying that he must have made a mistake. The director said that he had to be held accountable for it. So, the guy had no choice. He completely forgot that Yoon Tai-oh is a person who does not follow common sense, and it would be ridiculous to expect him to do the opposite. However, to his surprise, he was not the one who was beaten. Instead, Kim Dae-hyun got what he deserved. The man pressed his head with his shoe and asked him how he dared to let his hands go. After that, he asked the secretary if he had given him any incorrect instructions for the evening. He reminded him that he had asked him to go home and get some rest. So Paek Si-on had to apologize for that. Putting a piece of his torn shirt on his wound, the principal emphasized that he should be punished for it. A short time later, they left the establishment together and headed for the car. Paek Si-on still couldn't understand what had just happened because the man was not usually like this. However, when he saw him get into the front seat of the car, it was like he was electrocuted. The guy started smiling and holding the door, emphasizing that he would be driving today. However, the director did not like being forced to sit in the back seat of this stupid car again. Even though Paek Si-on explained that he couldn't sit behind him, the principal furrowed his brow and ordered him to just sit next to him. The boy had no choice, so when he heard the door slamming shut, he realized there was nothing he could do. It was evening, and there was a lot of traffic around as everyone was returning from work and school. However, the CEO was driving so fast that the secretary could hardly stop himself from closing his eyes in fear. Yoon Tai-oh noticed this and emphasized that he had just started moving more slowly, asking him what he would say about it. However, the boy did not know what to say, as he noticed that they were not moving towards his house, but in the other direction. The director said that he would take him to the hospital. However, the secretary immediately started shouting and asking where he could have been injured. When he saw that the man was silent, he realized that it was actually him, and he asked if it was true. Looking at the stern expression on the director's face, he decided that the questions were unnecessary, remembering that this bastard did not like being forced to repeat the same thing several times. So they continued to drive in silence. At some point, Paexion noticed that the man looked quite good, and his wrists seemed quite strong. In addition, he was disturbed by his smell, which, even against the background of smoldering cigarettes, was similar to the scent of perfume. Lost in his thoughts, he came to his senses only when the man asked him how long it would take, as he was holding his hand. Paxion hurriedly took it away and apologized. He himself was shocked because he hadn't even realized he was touching him. The man smiled and said that it looked like he wanted to be scolded, so Paxion thought he was done for. After a while, they finally returned home. He was holding the medicine in his hands and trying to watch what his boss was going to say and do. He sat down on the couch and called him over. Then he asked him to explain everything from the beginning. He emphasized that he had clearly told him to stay at home and asked why he was there. The secretary started apologizing again. However, he said that he must have a hearing problem because he told him to explain everything, not to apologize. So, he said that he had received a call saying that Kim Dae-hyun was missing, so he decided to go in search of him. He also added that he thought he would be very upset if he found out about it later. The director asked if he was ignoring his orders. The young man emphasized that the man himself had told him on the phone that he needed to find the boss. Yoon Tai. Oh took his head in his hands and asked if he was trying to pick on his previous words. He also asked him what the others were doing. The boy couldn't really answer, but bowed low and apologized, offering to carry out any punishment. However, the principal noticed that his face showed something else, namely that he did not want to be punished. Paexion was furious, not understanding since when did this bastard become so harsh in his statements. Yoon Tai-o added that this could not go on and emphasized that from now on, he would be under house arrest. When the secretary asked what this meant, he explained that he was forbidding him to leave the house until his wounds healed. This came as a shock to Paexion, as he did not expect his husband to take care of him. One thing he did not understand was whether it was punishment or care. Suddenly, from a distance, he heard the footsteps of the guards, who ran up to the boss to tell him what happened next. Kang Seok-ho noticed that they hadn't left any traces, but the director scolded them for being late and wasting a lot of time with that bastard. They started to apologize, but Yoon Tai-o stopped them. He emphasized that he was going to take a shower and ordered them to get out. As soon as the director walked out the door, Kang Seok-ho stayed and bowed to the secretary, which surprised him greatly. After that, he suddenly started yelling at the guy, accusing him of going there alone because anything could have happened to him. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the CEO's scream, which distracted them from clarifying all the issues. The secretary was very worried that something might have happened to him, so he ran straight to the door, asking if he was okay. However, his surprise knew no bounds when he saw him standing in front of the bathroom with candles burning and towels in the shape of elephants. The secretary realized that he would be asked for an explanation, but he didn't know how this could have gotten there. Yoon-tae. Oh thought that the guy was mocking him, but the security guard said that this was his job, which he learned when he worked in a Thai hotel. The man added that he had prepared scented candles called Sweet Dreams to help him sleep. The director was still very angry and ordered him to put everything away and leave. After that, he forbade his secretary to let Kang Seok-ho into his house. The latter was very upset, but Pak Sion tried to calm him down and quietly lead him out the door with his things. In his opinion, it was karma, as he was to blame for this, because he should not have trusted these scum with the housework. A little later, while packing, he was tormented by a statement. He kept thinking about the fact that the director had ordered him to be arrested in his house, not his. Recalling these words, he sadly realized that there was no smell of care here, and that everything was not as he thought. The guy nervously stuffed his clothes into the washing machine, wondering how many times a day the madman changed his clothes. However, he suddenly took his shirt and put it to his nose. It smelled so good that it immediately calmed him down. The guy remembered that the CEO had a great body and all his shirts looked great on him. Suddenly, he came to his senses and realized that he shouldn't think about it and behave like that. The secretary thought that in any case, house arrest was not so bad. However, he was expecting an additional fee for this, as otherwise he could have applied to the Ministry of Labor. Suddenly, his phone rang. The name of the Secretary General was displayed on the screen. However, when the guy started talking to him, he said that he was in big trouble. He started shouting in his ear and told him that the head of the second department had just disappeared as well. So, after a while, the secretary arrived at the office where a meeting was taking place with other employees. Paek-si-on noticed that the CEO was in a meeting and said that they didn't have much time, advising them to get started as soon as possible. So he summarized what they knew, namely that the head of the second department had quit. The older man sighed heavily and agreed that it was true. However, he noted that in their company there was no such thing as a dismissal. He reminded him that they treated their employees accordingly, and thanks to confidentiality, the turnover rate in their MK Capital secretarial team was 0%. However, the guy realized that this was not true because, in fact, people were killed before they quit. Therefore, the version that he could have escaped was unlikely, because, after all, Yoon Tae-oh could have caught him before he had time to leave the country. Finally, the older man said that they had all gathered to discuss new job responsibilities. He emphasized that the first department had been disbanded, which came as a surprise to the guy. Realizing that the company had finally recruited this department, he happily thanked the manager. He thought it was good news, as now he could say goodbye to boring housework. He said that 3 workers would be enough for him. However, the man stopped him and emphasized that he would still be the only employee in the first secretarial department. The guy was confused, but it was explained to him that it was all because the CEO was very angry. And he recounted his words that he would only let Secretary Kim into his house and no one else. The guy said that he understood, although he blamed Kan Seok-ho and his ugly elephants with candles. However, the man added something else. As he finished his tea, he told the boy that he would have to go to work with the director now. So he offered to take over the duties of the head of the second department. Although, in the guy's opinion, it shouldn't have been that way. Paik Sion started to argue and explained that there were already too many people there. He said that he was sure there were enough capable employees. However, he pointed out that if he could appoint anyone to head the department, it would be wiser to put him in charge. There was no arguing with that. Even if you are too good at your job, it will still become a problem at some point. The man emphasized that the boy would receive an increased salary for this. He also asked him to take care of the CEO. Leaving the meeting room, he wished the secretary a good rest during his vacation. However, the secretary said that he only had enough time to sleep. Hearing this, the man turned around and advised him to sleep like the dead, because no one knew how long he had to live. Paek Sion was shocked to hear this, but there was no turning back for him in this company. After a while, he was in the conference room with the director and praised him for his excellent work. However, he was angrily throwing documents around, emphasizing that he had these meetings several times a day. Pek Si-on was irritated by this. He did not understand how, with so much money, he could not hire a professional manager. He also resented the fact that he asked him about the construction of the resort, as he did not know what to say because he was not involved in the deal. The only thing he could say about it was that they were about a month behind schedule, and they still did not have a casino license. He also added that the contractor from the third district was getting paid, but he didn't hear that because he was too angry. Walking behind him, the secretary hoped that it could just be a mistake in the program, because otherwise it would not be good. Pike Si-on realized that the company's money could have just been stolen and felt lucky that the director was distracted and didn't suspect anything. In the end, he promised the man to check everything again and report back to him in the afternoon. The man was worried that the contractor was running away with the money. He realized that it was the executive secretary who was to blame for Yoon Tae. Not knowing anything about it, or he was deliberately hiding it, and perhaps that was why the head of the second department had run away so suddenly. Finally, the director emphasized that it was time for them to eat. So the secretary said that he had booked him a table at a Korean restaurant. Calling the elevator, the guy explained that he did it because he had eaten European cuisine for lunch and dinner yesterday. All this time, the secretary was paying attention to the fact that the CEO was constantly on the phone, realizing that he must have a lot to do. Suddenly, he noticed that his tie was not tightened, so he decided to step up to the plate and help fix it. He apologized for having to distract him for a moment and fixed it. However, he started shouting, asking him what he was doing and what he had forgotten next to him. At the same time, he called him by the name of Kim. For the 100th time, the guy tried to explain that his name was Pak Si-on, but the man just repeated his question. After that, he grabbed him by the face and asked if his words were nothing to him. However, when he denied it, he asked why he continued to ignore them, since he had ordered him to be under house arrest. The guy tried to explain, but the man clutched him so tightly that at the first sound he thought he would break his jaw. Finally, they arrived on the third floor of the underground building, and the man remembered that they had talked about the restaurant. So he let go of the secretary, who, in turn, began to greedily grab the air he needed so badly. The director emphasized that he would give him a chance to explain everything, but advised him to be very convincing. So, in a few minutes, they arrived at the restaurant and ordered a lot of delicious food. When everything was delivered, Yoon Tae-oh put his hand to his head and asked the receptionist why he was here. The secretary explained that they had a vacancy for the head of the second department, so he came to the office. The man added that he had also been informed about the escape of another employee. Paek Si-on confirmed that this was the case, but he was mentally shocked that he knew about it. He also clarified that he had been selected as a new candidate. However, in the director's opinion, it appeared that he had put the executive secretary's orders above him. The guy hastened to justify himself by saying that it was just an emergency situation that required such decisions. He also got up from the table and said that he was feeling much better, so there was no need to worry about it. However, the man began to pierce the tablecloth with a knife and emphasized that he had never seen such an impudent secretary before. The guy started apologizing and asked if there was a need to call the head of the third department. He really could not understand what he wanted from him. However, the man calmed down and advised him to just eat. Noticing that the secretary was hesitating, he ordered him to do as he was told. He also added that he didn't really like the head of the second department anyway, so he wanted to get rid of him anyway. Paek Si-on realized that he had no choice, so he said that he would eat, although he noted that he had no appetite. He realized that if it weren't for this place and the delicious food, it wouldn't be so cozy. After tasting the first dish, Pak Sion couldn't stop trying new ones, barely having time to chew everything. The CEO reminded him that he had recently said he had no appetite. The guy wiped himself with his shirt sleeve and said that he probably felt much better in the company of such a good CEO. However, only when he said it did he realize what a stupid thing he had said. So he felt very ashamed of it. At the same time, the man smiled and said that he was pleased to see him eating well, although he did not do it ethically. After that, he added that he had dinner plans tonight, so I advised him to go home. When the guy asked where he was going, he replied that he didn't have to report to his secretary. In fact, Paexion convinced himself that he didn't care about all this, because in his mind he had long since quit this stupid job. However, now he had to be polite. He bowed to the director, noting that he was handing him over to the security guards of the third department. As soon as he reached the door, he couldn't think of anything but happiness that he would finally be home soon. Unfortunately, the CEO noticed this and asked him why he was so happy. Paek Sion began to make excuses and said that it was not worth his attention. Instead, he advised him to be very careful. Despite this, he was still worried because every time he left, something bad happened. So these thoughts overwhelmed him, and he hurried to catch up with the CEO, offering to go with him. The next day, he regretted his work again, as instead of resting, he had to clean up again. As he was piling up the next load of laundry, the thought crossed his mind of trying to quit. He had worked so hard that he didn't even have time to eat. So as soon as he noticed the food on the stove, he decided to try it. However, as soon as he put the first spoonful in his mouth, he felt his phone vibrate on the chair behind him. He received a daily report on Yun Tai-o's activities and movements. He was surprised by the second paragraph, which said that he had gone out again with a restaurant employee. The guy was shocked that the CEO could find a new beta so quickly. He was confused, since numerous Yun Tai-o betas had ultimately brought him nothing but failure. And this all happened until the real protagonist appeared. Pak Sion was nervous about the CEO falling in love too often, until he heard his own voice behind him. The man was looking at the boy's behavior and asked him what he was doing. These words frightened the guy. The secretary came closer, bowed, and said that he had not noticed him coming home. The boy held on as best he could, although he was annoyed that Kan Seok-ho hadn't said a word in the report about him going home. Meanwhile, the CEO furrowed his brow and repeated his question again, expecting a quick answer. In addition, he noticed the food on the table and scolded him for not eating yet, even though it was quite late. Paik Si-on hurriedly cleared everything from the table and explained that it was because he was very hungry. However, the man stopped him by grabbing his shirt sleeve and ordered him to sit back down, as the food should not be thrown away. No matter how much the guy tried to explain that the food smelled bad and he would not like it, the man forced him to sit down and eat. After that, he began to take off his tie and watch, saying that he would be arriving at work an hour late tomorrow. Pak Sion reminded him that they had a breakfast meeting with the board of directors that he had to attend. He was surprised that the man was going to a beta meeting in the morning, ignoring work processes. The CEO folded his clothes on a chair and ordered them to tell him to wait for him. He said that no one would starve to death if he was an hour late. Then he went to his room. After a while, Paik Si-on also went to rest. He was thinking about how, in the original drama, Yun Tai-o was terrified of the smell of soup. He also found it strange that the department was reorganized in such a way, so it seemed a little different from the original. He remembered the restaurant, the employee, the lounge bar, but he couldn't remember the guy. The secretary tried to imagine who the young beta would be this time, since he couldn't remember his name at all. Suddenly, he jumped up on the bed because it finally occurred to him that it was Han Yeo-jun. This character was like a gloomy mower who was driving many people to death. Thus, the lives of several of them were in his hands. Paek Sion realized that he needed to do something to avoid the bloodbath he already knew about. It was also clear that things had been going wrong for a long time, so he had no choice but to help Yoon Tai-o and Beta make their love a reality. So, at the meeting, he said that yesterday their VIP person had had contact with a new Beta, and emphasized that from now on he would be tracking him himself. After that, he ordered everyone else to dig up everything they could find on the new guy, from his birth to the present. It was all necessary for the sake of a happy ending for all of them. So now it was the turn of the CEO, in front of whose door he was standing. Paek Sion walked inside, bowed, and asked his boss if he had really called him. Holding his hands in front of him, he asked if he had found the head of the second department. The secretary explained that he was looking for him, but there was not much information. The only thing known was that it had something to do with a resort. The guy explained that part of the money that had been given as a bribe for the casino had returned to his pocket. With his feet up on the table, the CEO finally realized why he had fled so quickly. So he ordered him to deal with the bastard quietly. He also asked him not to let the rumors get out. The man emphasized that the resort had to open within 3 months, so he ordered a TF team to be set up. Paek Sion agreed with his every word, but in reality he knew that the resort would never open. It was all about Yoon Tai-o's love for him, which made him that way, and it would lead to rash actions in the future. Just before leaving, the CEO ordered him to organize a dinner for 2 and book a room in a suitable place. The guy watched the man go, and it was obvious to him that when he met a new beta, it temporarily improved his mood. However, he also noted with sadness that the end would always be unhappy, no matter how hopeful these encounters were. After a while, Paek Sion came to the house where the boy lived and asked if he was really Han Yeo-jun. When he said he was, he handed him an envelope and told him that he was here on behalf of MK Capital's CEO Yoon Tae-o. However, he became nervous and turned away, remembering that he had already told him yesterday that this was an exaggeration. Paek Sion was sad that the bastard Yoon Tai-o always chose beggarly betters like this one. However, it was his job, so he suggested that the guy go for lunch and said that if he didn't go with him, he would be in big trouble. Han Yeo-jun agreed, but he asked him to wait a few minutes, which was not part of the secretary's plans. Paek Sion handed him a package and emphasized that they didn't have much free time, asking him to help him. The secretary remained waiting by the car, looking at his watch over and over again to make sure he arrived at the director's office on time. Finally, the beta came out to meet him. He asked shyly if he could really wear all this. The secretary said that it looked great on him, and he thought that right now he looked like Yoon Tae-o. As soon as they got into the car, Han Yeo-jun asked again if the guy was really giving him these clothes. Paek Sion started to buckle up and said it was a gift. The new guy smiled, thanked him, and asked how he could address him. So the secretary said his name. Looking at how the beta was sincerely happy about the clothes and said that he would wear them with pleasure, the guy saw something innocent and sweet in him. After a while, the car stopped at the designated place, and Paek Sion was the first to get out. When they went inside, it was obvious that Han Yeo-jun was quite nervous, as he was constantly looking around. The secretary was also surprised to see the CEO at the table, as he hadn't expected him to be the first to arrive. The man angrily called out to him, calling him Kim again, and ordered him to follow him. The man advised Han Yo-jun to drink some tea and assured him that he would be back soon. After that, he followed the man. When they got outside, the CEO lit a cigarette and ordered his secretary to explain what was going on. The secretary did not understand what he had done wrong again, but the man asked him why he was still here. He emphasized that he had asked him to just make a reservation, not to bring him here. So the guy started apologizing again. Yoon Tae-oh said that they had to go back and on the way advised the receptionist to just do what he was told. As soon as they got to the entrance, the man noticed that the guy wasn't going inside, so he asked why he wasn't. However, when he replied that they would be more comfortable without him, the director got angry and pointed to a chair near the table. Paik Sion, of course, agreed and silently went in, although he did not understand why he was forcing him to do so. The two boys sat next to each other and felt very awkward, constantly waiting for the man sitting across from them to start talking. Paik Sion was annoyed that the man had dragged him along on his date, and now he was feeling very embarrassed. Finally, Yoon Tae-oh started asking Han Yo-jun if everything went well yesterday. The latter replied that it had. The secretary looked at the man and realized that he had nothing on his mind, as he was not asking very romantic questions. So he decided that he could save the situation and offered everyone to try the Ara perch, which was very fresh. At the same time, he stepped on the CEO's foot to give him a hint as to how to behave. The guy whispered that the man needed to help him and be very polite, although, in fact, he did not understand why he should teach him etiquette. So the man put the dish on a separate plate and handed it to the secretary, emphasizing that he said it was delicious. Paik Sion tried to explain that things were not going according to plan, but there was nothing to do, so he thanked him. After that, he asked Han Yo-jun to eat more, and he agreed, which surprised the CEO. The man turned to the newcomer and noticed that the two had become quite close. The guy confirmed that the secretary was a very nice guy. However, the conversation didn't go any further, so they all sat in silence, feeling rather uncomfortable. The secretary started eating because he had no idea what else he could do. In his opinion, he just needed to relax and at least enjoy the food. He was so busy savoring the fish that he didn't even notice that he was being watched from the side, puzzled. The CEO smiled and remarked that he had a pretty good appetite. Han Yo-jun also had a smile on his face. It was clear that he was favorably disposed toward the boy. As he chewed on the fish, the secretary was pleasantly surprised to see what the new guy liked. So, the next day, during a meeting, Paik Sion started asking the staff who had been involved in the research. One of them raised his hand and said that he, the head of the department, had been looking for all the information. Paik Sion picked up the report and asked him if he was sure that Han Yo-jun was a loner, as he did not understand why he was still alive. The secretary said that he had done his own investigation and found out that the guy had been in a long-term relationship. He was furious and shouted as he asked the staff what they thought about it. In fact, this was an important part in the original, as Han Yo-jun would eventually dump Yoon Tae-oh and choose a lover. Thrown to the mercy of fate, the CEO will go crazy and kill most of his secretaries. Leaning his hand on the papers, the secretary began to emphasize that his former lover was in prison, but would soon be released. He said that they needed to stop him before he returned to Han Yo-jun. They did. A little later, while dealing with work issues, the CEO said that the new guy had moved out. He added that he had chosen a luxury villa with very tight security, such that his ex would not be able to get in. The secretary realized that he had to save the day, so he told him that Han Yo-jun had invited him to dinner as a thank you and asked the man to go with him. Yoon Tai Oh leaned back and accepted the offer. He said he was very hungry and suggested that they go there right now. Paik Sion was glad that he decided to do so because from that moment on, he planned to bring them closer together gradually to change the original ending. So after a while, they drove up by car to Han Yo-jun's place of residence. As soon as the door opened, a guy came out to meet them, and he was very happy that Paik Sion had come to see him. However, when he noticed the CEO next to him, his smile immediately disappeared. Since he didn't want to appear rude, he invited them both inside his house. Paik Sion thanked him for the invitation, although looking at the CEO's sad face, he didn't understand what he had done wrong. However, when he went further and noticed that the table was set for only 2 people, he realized that the guy had invited him alone. In order to get out of the awkward situation, he pushed back his chair and invited Yoon Tae-oh to sit down, saying that he was not feeling well and they could eat together. Han Yo-jun didn't know what to do, so he started by thanking the CEO for the house. He took a drink of red wine and asked why he was still addressing him so formally. It sounded strange to him. In addition, he noticed that the dishes he cooked were a little too salty, although they tasted good. Meanwhile, Pak Sion was recording on his phone that the VIP was having dinner at the house of a beta who couldn't cook. However, before he could finish, the CEO walked past him and called him to come out with him. The secretary tried to stop him, emphasizing that he should at least drink coffee after eating. Han Yo-jun was very upset because he thought that the secretary was very angry with him. The guy explained that it happens and advised him not to worry. He said they could have lunch tomorrow if he had time. So he agreed. As soon as they got into the car, the secretary began to wonder what could have happened and whether it was something bad. At the same time, the CEO asked Paik Sion if he really thought he was a fool. He recalled how the table was set and said that he knew how to tell if it was for him or not. Despite the fact that the guy apologized for being the third wheel, he said that it didn't matter and he just wanted to make sure he was right. The guy was surprised by this attitude, but now he was sure that everything would not go according to plan. Since then, he has done much less housework than usual because he started thinking with his head. Instead of doing the laundry, he now called the laundry service. Thanks to the laundry, which was recognized by the British royal family, he could easily solve the problem of annoying laundry. However, lately he was worried that Yoon Tae-oh was acting a little strange, and last night was just one example. So he wished the director a good rest, bowed to him, and was about to go to his room. However, the man suddenly said that he hadn't had dinner yet, which seemed rather ambiguous given his work schedule. Paik Sion smiled and noticed that he had eaten recently, thinking that the man must have already started to develop dementia. However, the director emphasized that he was not referring to himself, but to him. The man was shocked, but said that he was fine. The guy was even more surprised when the man offered to eat soup with him, which was impossible. The CEO didn't understand why the secretary wouldn't try the cooked meal. The secretary, in turn, could not come to his senses because what was happening was completely different from what was in the drama. Eventually, after calming down, he asked the man if the soup tasted okay and if it was not overly salty. Yoon Tae O said that the dish was very tasty, and it was probably because it was prepared by Secretary Kim. He then thanked him. Now, Paek Sion couldn't put it all together. Last night's dinner with the beta, the soup, and even the gratitude he had never heard before were all strange. He wondered if the CEO was really the main character in the drama he knew. The secretary tried not to think about it so much, forcing himself to believe that it was all because of his mood. He wanted only one thing: for Yoon Tae-oh to find his soulmate and end his story. The secretary dreamed that maybe then he would be able to return to where he used to live. The very next day, Paik Sion returned to work. He had too many thoughts in the morning, so he tried to come to his senses. However, as soon as they got off the elevator, the secretary accidentally stepped on the CEO's foot. He started asking him why he was treading on his feet and recalled that the same thing had happened at the restaurant. Paik Si-on apologized, waving his hands and saying that he was very sorry for what happened. However, the man came closer to him and whispered that he would have to break his leg so that he would never be able to get up again. The secretary begged him not to do so and assured him that it would never happen again. However, the CEO had a smile on his face and emphasized that he was just joking. Then he ran his hand through his hair and asked him what he was so afraid of that his mouth was trembling. After saying that, Paik Sion ran out of the elevator like a madman, not noticing anyone around him. One of the employees wanted to ask him what happened, but he ran past him like a bolt of lightning. Realizing that he was getting into an awkward situation, he shouted after him that he would tell him everything later. The guy barely managed to get to the restroom, turned on the water, and started washing his face to come to his senses. He could not believe what had just happened to him. The fact that Yoon Tai-o had called him handsome, which was not at all appropriate for a cold-blooded director. He had a very strange feeling, so he took some pills out of his pocket and took 3 of them at once. In fact, he had a secret that no one knew about. In fact, he was the only Omega in that company. In this regard, the question was why he would keep it a secret. However, this is the basic premise of the drama. CEO Yoon Tai-o is a dominant alpha with a serious Omega phobia that everyone knew about. Therefore, the Omega could not resist joining the company, and it was not him but a guy named Pak Sion. It was an unusual situation that came to light later, shortly after he joined the company. Before he got this job, Paik Sion was taking pheromonium regulators, keeping it a secret. So that was why it was now so difficult for him to keep the secret of the secretary a secret. One thing he didn't understand, however, was why he was feverish at the slightest contact with a dominant alpha, despite the fact that he was taking the medication. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by someone's scream. Someone started addressing him behind his back. It was Kan Seok-ho, who took his hands because he was very worried about him, although it was quite strange for the guy. Nevertheless, the man said that there were rumors in the company that he had been hit by their VIP. Paik Sion recalled the way the employees looked at him when he ran to the restroom and realized that they must have misunderstood him. So he explained that he had just stepped on the director's foot and should not have been beaten by him. The man scratched his head and said that he had already thought that he would have to deal with him because he had made a mistake. After that, he put his hand on his shoulder and asked him to be very careful in the future, as they still had a lot to do. However, Paek Sion suddenly remembered that Kan Seok-ho was also the dominant alpha in the drama. So he decided that he should check if the regulators actually worked. So he asked him to lend him his hand for a while, which surprised the guard. However, this was only the beginning. Paik Sion put it on his head, expecting the same reaction as with the CEO. This act made the man very angry. He started screaming and asking why he was doing this to him. The guy emphasized that he just wanted to check something. Then he asked him to move his fingers. He urged him to do it on one side of his head and then on the other, but he had no reaction. Paik Sion didn't feel as feverish as before, so he was sure that the problem was not with the regulators. Kan Seok-ho was shocked by this behavior and started shouting, asking how he could grab a random man's hand. The security guard worriedly told him that they had to leave and asked him not to do it again. Given what had happened, the secretary thought that this cleared things up and meant that he could not control his pheromones properly. Now he realized why Kan Seok-ho had reacted the way he did to the omega hormones, because he hadn't even felt it. The secretary needed to go to the hospital as soon as possible, because if Yoon Tae-oh realized he was an omega, he would have to leave. He would have to leave. Park Si-yeon decided to waste no time and immediately called a taxi to take him to the hospital. Dr. Yoon Sun-hyun examined him and said that he was fine and that he was responding well to the pheromone regulators. However, this did not explain why he had such reactions to Yoon Tae-oh and Kan Seok-ho. When he went back, he couldn't find a place for himself. However, he realized that the most important thing now was that no one knew he was an Omega. Suddenly, the taxi stopped right in the middle of the road, as it was blocked by other cars ahead. As Park Si-yeon looked around, the driver said that he was unlikely to be able to continue. So, the secretary handed him a bank card to pay and said he would get off here. The area around Yoon Tae-oh's house was a mess, so he decided to take care of it before the director returned. However, what he saw when he went inside terrified him even more than he could have thought. There were many men from their company standing around the room. They had their heads down and were simply silent. The boy began to ask them anxiously what they were doing here, until he heard his name called. It turned out that he had been approached by Yoon Tae-oh, who was sitting in the living room with his head in his hands. The secretary was very surprised because he was not supposed to be here at that time. He also remembered that the man had an appointment with Han Yeo-jun. Suddenly, the director looked up and asked the man where he was. He replied that he had gone to the hospital for a short time. Yoon Tae-oh gestured with his finger that he wanted to see him. So, the boy came closer. Holding his head, the director told Park Si-yeon that he probably thought he was very easy to manipulate. The secretary tried to defend himself and explained that he shouldn't even think about such a thing, and that it would never happen. However, the man asked why he didn't know that there were no secretaries in the first department. The guy did not understand what he was talking about, since he had been the only secretary there for a long time. Suddenly, the CEO emphasized that since he was doing all the work, he was constantly sick and going to the hospital. Park Si-yeon was disappointed because that wasn't the case at all, and he complained that he must have misunderstood. Yoon Tae-oh looked around the room with his stern gaze and asked who knew about it all. The men began to raise their hands timidly, and it turned out that there was not a single employee who did not know about it, except for the CEO, who was shocked that he was the only one who knew nothing. So he ordered to get rid of everyone except the secretary, as he did not need incompetent people. In front of the boy's eyes, they began to break the hands of the employees until the CEO stopped them. One of the men was happy that he wanted to save his life, but he ordered his tongue to be cut out to prevent him from spreading rumors. The secretary tried to justify himself and shouted that he had accidentally made a mistake. He also promised to immediately find employees for the first department. However, it was all in vain. Instead, when almost everyone had left, Yoon Tae-oh picked up a package and emphasized that the secretary should also be punished. He got up from the couch and asked the boy to follow him, because he had something to tell him. Finally, they went to the dining room. The man pulled back a chair near the table and invited the boy to sit down. After that, he put the package in front of him and squinted his eyes and tilted his head down. Park Si-yeon assumed that he probably had a sore throat, so he offered to bring him some water. However, he told him to stay where he was. He agreed, but he was worried that the other man might find out that he was an Omega. He wondered how to tell him about it and whether he would believe him if he told him that the symptoms had appeared later. Suddenly, the man wagged his finger again, indicating that he wanted the secretary to come over. Pak Sion turned pale but approached the man. The only thought in his mind was that today was the day of his death. The man began to examine him and said that he would not say that he was sick. He was terrified because he had regulators in his pocket that no one was supposed to see. However, the CEO ordered him to open the package on the table, which scared him even more. He realized that if this was a punishment, then given Yoon Tae-o's character, there might be something strange inside. However, it turned out to be a traditional Korean menu from the restaurant he had been to last time. The secretary looked at the CEO, not hiding his surprise, and the CEO just asked what was wrong. Smiling, he asked if he was expecting any other punishment than this. The boy took out the food and frightenedly emphasized that he hadn't even thought about anything else. He also promised that he would eat well from now on. Yoon Tae-o watched him and said that it was very strange to him that he could eat and be like that. The man noticed that he was excited about something, so he asked him what he had just thought about. Paik Sion was going crazy with shame. He was annoyed that the medication kept causing problems, so he said that he just thought that he could punish him in another way, and that's why he was scared. Yoon Tae-o was curious, so he asked how he thought he was going to do it. In fact, Paik Sion seemed to be addicted to those pills. He had a lot of ideas in his head about how to fix this situation, so he decided to change the subject a bit. Specifically, he admitted that he also thought he would be fired, and that turned out to be a serious problem. The man couldn't believe him and said that he had no reason to fire his secretary, who was doing such a good job. Although it would have been even better for the guy if he had quit his job, because now he would have to do everything himself again. Unfortunately, he couldn't say it out loud, so he just confirmed the fact that he had fired all his secretaries and said that it was an exaggeration. The guy emphasized that these were people with families and livelihoods at stake, so he suggested that their work be reorganized more efficiently. Pak Si-on explained that people could be divided into 2 departments, and then he would not get tired or sick. He tried to get through to the CEO, so he added that we are talking about human lives and it is worth trying. The man put a glass of water on the table and agreed to his proposal, which surprised even the secretary. However, he had one condition. He said that if it happened again, he would do whatever he wanted. Paik Si-on agreed that he was absolutely right. After that, the man got up from the table and left. Soon after, he received a message from Kan Seok-ho saying that the VIP's order was to fire the secretary team. Paik Si-on turned off the screen and realized that he was saving the lives of some scum every time. Suddenly, he remembered that the director had a date with Han Yo-jun today, so he wondered how the guy was doing. However, his thoughts were interrupted by Yoon Tae-o, who suddenly put his hand on the table. He had just gotten out of the shower and asked the secretary to make another appointment with the new beta. The man turned around and walked away, but the boy remained wondering what was wrong. When he cleared the table, he had an unpleasant feeling that was hard to explain. So the next day, it was his job to comfort Han Yo-jun, who had been angry since the morning. He handed him a bag of food and apologized for the CEO as he was unable to attend yesterday's meeting. He accepted the gift and said that it was no big deal, although his face showed that he was not happy about it. Paik Si-on bowed and thanked him. However, in his mind, he hated himself for doing this because he did not think it was his fault. A short time later, he had to stand in the CEO's office and justify himself because he asked him where he went today. The man was annoyed that he was not going to report to him again for every absence. Pexion apologized and said that he just didn't want to bother him at the morning meeting. The CEO started to get up from the table and asked where he had gone this time. Then he got so close to the guy that he was afraid he was going to be bitten on the neck. The secretary turned his head away because he realized he could never tell the truth. Instead, he emphasized that next time he would leave a message on his phone. The CEO noticed that his behavior had been rather strange lately, so he asked him if he was seeing a girl during work hours. Pak Sion froze in place at these words. He didn't understand how he could talk about a mistress, since he works for him all the time without rest. Yun Tae, O, in turn, emphasized that as long as he was doing his job, it would not bother him. After that, the man silently turned around and calmly walked to his workplace. Pexion was stunned because from now on, he was a secretary who spent time with girls during work hours. Suddenly, the CEO approached him again and asked if he had another appointment. The guy replied that he had booked a table at the Dole Hotel and the lounge on the top floor. Looking through the papers, the man asked what was going on with the room. The man said that it was in the same hotel. Hearing this, Yoon Tae-o waved and told Pak Sion that he was free to go. The secretary headed for the door, but the CEO's suggestion was still on his mind, so he suddenly stopped. Pak Sion began to speak to the man in such a way that he even looked away from his documents. The man said that he was not so crazy as to spend time with strangers during working hours. He added that he was not dating anyone. As soon as he left the office, tears appeared in his eyes. He was very offended to hear such things about him. However, Yoon Tae-o suddenly caught up with him and grabbed his hand tightly. The secretary was shocked, not understanding what was happening. He began to ask what he was smelling all the time. After all, if he was going to work, why did he smell so strongly of Han Yo-jun? He began to explain that it was all about work, because he hadn't come to his meeting yesterday and he had to make another one. The guy said that it was all a misunderstanding and emphasized that he also had his own tastes. Then he realized that he had said too much and covered his mouth. In fact, Yoon Tae-o was someone he was interested in, but he shouldn't have spoken about it too openly. So he said that he just didn't like Han Yo-jun. The man smiled as he tightened the boy's tie and asked him who he liked then. Paek Si-on could hardly breathe, but he admitted that he would rather choose the CEO than Han Yo-jun. Only after he said that did Han Yo-jun let him go and let him finally breathe. Paek Si-on confirmed once again that this meant that the CEO was very attractive and that he was not interested in Han Yo-jun. Suddenly, however, the man froze in place and asked if the other guy felt the same way. So he decided to come up with something. He offered the secretary a bet. He had to agree because he had no choice. After what happened, he could barely make it to the restroom. He was worried that now, when he saw Yoon Tae-o, his heart was pounding as if it was going to jump out of his chest. In fact, last night he was having strange fantasies involving the CEO. Recalling the recent meeting, he realized that he had just felt like a different person again. Barely able to contain his emotions, he decided that he needed to call the hotel first and book a room. However, when he took his phone out of his pocket, he noticed that he had 10 missed calls from Kan Seok-ho. He immediately called him back and asked him what had happened. He told him that they were in big trouble. The guard said that this morning they had released Lee Ji-seon, the beta's lover, early, and then he disappeared without a trace. The man emphasized that they did everything possible to find him, but all attempts were in vain. The secretary began to shout and reminded them that he had ordered them to increase security at the beta, scolding them for not keeping a good eye on him. And when he heard that the third security department was doing it, he grabbed his head because it was impossible to escape through them. Park Si-yeon hurried to his car and, on the way, said that he had some things to do before meeting with the beta. So he emphasized that he would first stop by Han Yo-jun's place. Starting the navigation, the guy realized that everything was very bad and wondered how to get out of it. He was surprised that Kan Seok-ho had always done a great job with everything, but he was able to make such a mistake. It was also important that there was nothing he could do about it, so he had to prevent their touching reunion at all costs. Luckily, after a while, he received a call from a security guard who told him that the VIP and the beta had met, so he shouldn't worry. The man sent him a photo for the report, which reassured the secretary enough. He was glad that they were brought out face to face. Now he was sure that there would be no more security problems, so he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. As he loosened his tie, he realized that he needed a break and a little respite right away. Pike Si-on closed his eyes and leaned back, thinking that he had had enough. He remembered how yesterday Yoon Tai-o had mistakenly decided that he liked Han Yo-jun. He was also worried about that argument. However, he hoped that once they spent time together, everything would get better. Suddenly, he heard strange footsteps near the car. Then someone called him, saying his name. Before he could come to his senses, he was clasped in the arms of Lee Ji-seon, who was trying to put him to sleep. The man was very persistent and impudent. He also angrily said that there was a price to pay for seducing other people's lovers. In the last seconds of his consciousness, Park Si-yeon could only make sure once again that it was indeed Beta's lover. After that, he lost consciousness. He came to only at night on the cold floor, completely tied up with ropes. As soon as Lee Ji-seon noticed that the secretary had regained consciousness, he adjusted his cap and said that he had barely waited for him to wake up. As he turned on the light, he emphasized that it was better to talk face to face than to try to make assumptions. As soon as the lights came on, Park Si-yeon immediately recognized the place because it was Han Yo-jun's old house. Lee Ji-seon came closer to him and got angry that he had been here before.